Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. Look here, y'all. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about something that I know that you're not going to hear on any other podcast. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened, but I'm just saying that you're not going to hear it on any other podcast because I go into detail with these stories, and I hope that you appreciate that and understand the reason behind me doing it is because I want you to know the real deal that goes on in here, the facts, the fullness of the whole story, right? So that you can come away with understanding what this lifestyle is really all about, right? Sometimes it's grimy, sometimes it's gritty, but at the end of the day, it's all true. Now, this episode that I'm going to be talking about is one of those that it's a full circle moment. It's a full circle moment. You know what I'm saying? It's about this guy that's in prison and he ends up in a relationship with a female officer. And out of that, a child is born, all right? So I want to break that story down for you and tell you a little bit about it. Some of it is going to sound messed up, but I'm going to stick to the facts as they are because the way it ends is going to be, like, wow, didn't see that coming, okay? At the end of the day, I hope that you enjoy it, you know what I'm saying? So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Early in my incarceration, after I got off max, right, I ran into a lot of guys that were doing a lot of things. And back in the day, I'm going to keep it real, they didn't have a lot of cameras in these places, right? So you could get away with doing all kinds of things. You know what I'm saying? People were having sex in the VG, people were having sex in the units. And I'm talking about officers and inmates, you know what I'm saying, in the units and so on and so forth, right? So I knew this guy, this one dude, man, he was straight-laced dude, right? But anyway, he was one of those guys that he was wild. He was into everything. And he had the gift of gab. You know what I'm saying? So it was this female officer that worked in our unit, and he came up with her. It's as simple as that. He came up with her, you know what I'm saying? And they were doing that thing for a while. And every time we would go out for chow in the afternoon, we go to eat at 4:30, he would stay back in the unit hanging out. And when we would come back, you know what I'm saying, he would always be chilling. And the officer, she would be in a different mood, all happy and go lucky and all this, because she just got her some. You know what I'm saying? And after a while, it got to the point, this dude here, right, he was the type, he couldn't keep his mouth shut, y'all. So he would tell different people this and that, just running his mouth. So one day, he told his cellie what was going on, right? And he told his cellie, if you want something, let me know. You know what I mean? And of course, he's locked up. His cellie told him, yeah. So he told his cellie on pizza day. Now, pizza day is a big deal in the penitentiary back in the day. It still is to this day, but, they don't have pizza as often as they used to. But back in the day, I'm telling you, pizza and chicken and fish day, look here, man, ain't nobody missing, right? And this dude that was cellies with the guy that I know, he loved pizza. So on pizza day, his cellie tells him to hang back, you know what I'm saying? He gonna get him something from the officer, right? So he tells me, he said, man, I love pizza, man. I think I need to go to chow. I'll catch you when I come back. He said, man, you either got to get you some pizza or some tail. Which one do you want? So he told him he would hang back. So sure enough, he stayed back. And when, they were in the room together, she came to the room like clockwork. They put the violation up over the window, covered it up. She dropped her pants and let, the dude that I know, he hit her first. You know what I'm saying? And then his cellie. And they just having a good time. You know what I mean? That's just what it was. I'm keeping it raw like that because I want you to understand something about how things work in here at some times. Not all the time, sometimes, right? And she left the room. Well, they let her always clean up. You know what I'm saying? She cleaned herself up and then she went back to work, so on and so forth. And that was that on that. You know what I'm saying? But it got to the point to where his cellie got nervous because he talked too much. So the guy that I know, like I said, he talked so much, his cellie was like, I got to get out of here because he saw the writing on the wall. He was telling other guys about it. This dude was one of those types of dudes that he didn't think it was fun, you know what I'm saying, doing what he was doing if people didn't know. You know what I'm saying? He just liked to run his mouth. So eventually in the penitentiary, come on, man, look here. If you're talking about sex and money, You know what I'm saying? That's two things you need to keep to yourself. If you're getting money, you need to keep that to yourself, how you're doing it as best you can. If you're getting some sex from somebody, you most definitely need to keep that to yourself as best you can, because if you don't, somebody's going to want that. Somebody's going to want that. So anyway, his cellie moves out. Goes to the unit manager, get the unit manager to move him. Doesn't get him. Back in the day, you really didn't need a reason. As long as you had some other cell that you could go to and the person that was in that cell didn't mind that you went. You feel what I'm saying? That you lived with him. So they moved him out. Sure enough, 2 or 3 weeks later, they bust him. Because he had told this dude, he had went and told this other dude that he was knocking her down and that he had a pair of her panties in the cell that he kept overnight. You know what I'm saying? To smell on. For real. So when they busted him, they find the panties. They confront her with it. Of course, she denied it, but they went with the move, walked her off the compound, pending investigation, embarrassed her. So she quit. She didn't come back. She didn't want to go through that. She went on with her life, right? She went on with her life. Well, guess what, y'all? 9 months later, she has a daughter. She has a daughter, a baby girl. Now, the people that worked at the prison, they all lived in the same area, right? I'm not going to name the area, you know what I'm saying? Because I don't want to embarrass anybody and all this and that, right? That's for them to tell them. You know what I'm saying? I'm telling the story as I see it. So, a couple of the people that lived in the same neighborhood as this former officer, they would see her with this girl, this little baby girl, every now and then. And they would come back to the prison and they would say, I know it's true now. Now, they were talking to, check this out, not the dude that was running his mouth, but his cellie, the guy that I really didn't know that well. They were getting at him saying, man, I saw such and such officers, former officers, baby, and that little girl looks just like you. Looks just like you. And he denied it. He was like, I don't know what you're talking about, this, and that. But it was so many people that worked at the institution that lived in the same neighborhood as she did that they knew that it was true at this point because it's proof. DNA don't lie. You feel me? The baby is right there and it looks like the guy that was selling, the one that moved out. You feel what I'm saying? Keep up with the story now. The guy that moved out of the cell is the father of this child. So they think. Because the child looks just like him. That's what they're saying. Now keep in mind, now he's got about 40 or 50 years to go. So even if he is the father, he's not going to reach out. And he didn't reach out. He did not reach out. He's got a parole date, you know what I'm saying? But it's so far off that he's like, man, no. And plus he's afraid because if they do find out that he is the father, he didn't know what they would do. So he says nothing for 23 years. 23 years, he says absolutely nothing. Now, after 23 years, everybody that was there at that time is gone except for the inmates. You feel me? He's much older. You feel what I'm saying? He's right at 50 at that point. I'm in another prison. I'm gone. I done been moved around so many times at this point that it's, you know what I'm saying, beyond, you know what I'm saying, it ain't even worth counting all the places that I've been. But 20 some odd years later, guess what? She gets a job at the prison that he was at. Now, he's at another facility at this point. You feel what I'm saying? But it's still in that vicinity. You see what I'm saying? So she gets a job at that prison. Nobody knows about him and this former officer potentially having a daughter. So this young girl, she gets a job at the prison. And lo and behold, she's assigned to work in an area where he walks past every day. He walks past every day and he saw her and he was like, wow, she looks like such and such. Blew his mind. He just could not stop looking at her. And then he got to thinking, wait a minute. Such and such years. She's got to at least be 18 to work here. So he starts doing the math. But he never had the opportunity. It took a while before he got the opportunity to say something to her, right? Now, keep in mind, I know now, and I'm going to go ahead and say it for the sake of the story, her mother never told her what was up. And you're going to understand later on how I know that, okay? But her mother never told her that her father or potential father could possibly be somebody in prison, okay? Now, so he does everything he can to try to get to her. He just wants to ask her what her name is. So after a few months of persistently trying to get in the area that she's in without getting in trouble, because we just can't go anywhere we want to anytime we want to, okay, in the penitentiary. So he finally gets to her. And he has to, you know what I'm saying, butter her up at first, because we really not supposed to even have them type of conversations with officers. But she was a young officer, you know what I'm saying? And she was uncomfortable, so he was trying to make her feel comfortable. He was an older guy, so she really didn't see him as somebody that might have been trying to come up, okay? So he's talking to her. He's trying to be, you know what I'm saying, that person that gives her advice, tells her what she should do, what she shouldn't do, as far as, you know, people in here, giving her the right advice. You feel what I'm saying? Because now in his mind, he's thinking, oh my God, could what they were saying years ago be true? And if it is true, this has got to be her. That's all he kept saying. She was like identical to her mother, but he could see traces of himself in her. And he was like, man. So when he finally got to ask her, he said, what is your name? Now they have their last names on there, on the badges, right? You know, they got the little name tags and stuff like that. So it's Officer such and such, right? So he asked her name, this, that, and the third, and he's like, do you know such and such? Because her last name was different than her mother's that he remembered, okay? He said, do you know such and such? And she was like, yeah, that's my mom. And look here, he almost had a heart attack. He leaned back up against the wall and he said, oh my God, I know your mother. I know your mother. And she said, how you know my mother? He said, tell your mother. He just skipped past her asking that question. He said, tell your mother that such and such said, hey. And then you tell her that I said, I see that it's true. Just tell her that. Just tell her that. So this young girl is looking at him like, okay, but what are you talking about? He wouldn't tell her. He said, I'm going to let your mama tell you. Now she's really looking at him like, okay, because she's go through all the training that they go through. So she's looking at him now like, is he playing some kind of game with me? He's trying to mess with my head. You know what I'm saying? Because they've taught us that these inmates lie about everything, so on and so forth. So she's looking at him real suspicious. But when she gets home, she tells her mother. She said, I met this guy in prison today named such and such. And he told me to tell you that I see that it is true and ask you, did you know him? And she sat there, her mother sat there, eyes wide open as the story was given to me. It's like, oh my God, I do know him. And she said, well, what did you think about him? She said, he's a nice old man. You know what I'm saying? And she said, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you something. And, she set her daughter down and she explained to her all of her past, because now she was a saved woman living her life the right way. But she was like anybody else. She had a past. She had a past. So she was trying to explain to her daughter, you know what I'm saying, all the things that she did in a way that wouldn't hurt her daughter. She left out some of the details, how loose she was. You feel what I'm saying? And you got to respect that. But she told her daughter that she thinks that he's the father. So she asked her daughter sat there and she started crying because she always wanted to know. She had a stepfather that had come and gone. You know what I'm saying? He passed away. He treated her nice. But she knew that was not her biological father. And she always wanted to know who her father was. And her mother always resisted telling her because she had no way of making the what her daughter wanted come true. Her daughter wanted contact with him. But she had forgotten about him to the extent that thinking that he would get out and do the right thing and all this and that, because he was not the main guy that she was messing with. Remember, she was messing with his cellie, and his cellie basically offered her up to him, for a quickie. You feel what I'm saying? And she was, back in the day, people had past. I'm telling you now, you know how it go. Y'all don't get to tripping. So she just didn't know how to explain all of that to her daughter, that this man, out of a one occasion thing, could be her father. And how do you get in touch with him and all this and so on and so forth, right? So now, as fate would have it, she's bumped into her father at the prison that she works at. Now she wants to confirm it. So she goes back to work and she tells him everything. And she's upset, but she's happy at the same time. And now it took some time. Now, it didn't happen overnight, okay? It took some time, but she finally convinced him to let her take a Q-tip, swab his mouth, and she took a piece of hair too, and she smuggled it out. And she went and got a DNA test secretly, okay? And bam, you are the father. He turns out to be her father. And it was bittersweet at first. It was bittersweet. But when she went back to work, she ended up getting put in the unit that he was in. And every day they talked. They didn't agree. She didn't cut him any slack. She did her job. He told her, look, you are here to do a job. You need to do your job. She shook him down when she was supposed to. She was aggressive with the guys when she needed to be. You know what I'm saying? He had her back too. He had a lot of respect in the unit. He had her back. So did nobody mistreat her? She didn't do none of the stuff that her mother did. He made sure of that. You know what I'm saying? If somebody was sitting down trying to talk to her, because she was a pretty girl, he made sure that's not going to happen. You feel what I'm saying? And she really ended up respecting him way more than she thought she would. And guess what happened, y'all? Now, all of a sudden, the mother starts to write him. And they have a long talk back and forth in these letters. And then eventually he starts to call and they're talking on the phone, And he lets her know he's about to go for parole and all this and that. And he hopes to be able to meet her when he gets out, not to have a relationship, just to meet her. You know what I'm saying? And he makes parole. He makes parole, gets out, and they don't end up in a relationship, okay? This is not one of those stories that you're going to see on TV. But they don't end up in a relationship, but they end up to be really good friends. And after about 2 or 3 months of her father being out, she ended up quitting corrections. You know what I'm saying? And they have a great relationship today, a great relationship. And I wanted to tell you that story because I wanted to tell you the story because a lot of times, things happen, man, that are unexpected. And you get these opportunities, these rare opportunities in life to do the right thing. And when you get the opportunity to do the right thing, you should take it. Sometimes it's painful. But it's the best thing to do. And a lot of us in here, we do all kinds of things and get involved in all kinds of situations, not really looking at the consequences and how it's going to affect other people. Think about this girl, 20 some odd years, she wanted to know who her father was. And he's sitting in prison and she didn't get to have, even if her mother would have told her the type of relationship that she would have wanted, she couldn't have. But she finally was able to get it. She was finally able to get it, right? And that's what happens with a lot of people that have parents in prison. They don't have the type of relationships that they want because of the dumb decisions that we make. I know my son's experienced it. My granddaughter, she experienced it with my son. So when you get the opportunity, whether you come to prison or not, you get in trouble or not, when you have the opportunity to do the right thing by your children or by your family member, by your friend, look here, Sometimes you need to take that deep breath and do the right thing because it's going to work out. It's going to work out because this situation worked out. No, the mother and the father are not in a relationship, but they are good friends. It wasn't meant for them to be together like that, I guess. You understand? But they are good friends. And the moral of the story is, well, look, things might look rough and it might look impossible. But if you do the right thing, it will work out the way it's intended to work out. You understand what I'm saying? Keep that in mind, y'all. Always. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.